Hi, I'm Madison. I'm a fourth-year medical student at Johns Hopkins, just 3 months away from graduating and starting my residency in pediatric oncology. I've wanted to be a doctor since I was 8 years old, ever since my little cousin beat leukemia. But that Tuesday morning in November, when Dr. Reynolds called me into his office with my test results, everything I'd worked for suddenly hung in the balance. "Madison, I need you to sit down," he said, his usually warm voice carrying an edge I'd never heard before. The MRI images on his computer screen showed a mass on my thyroid that hadn't been there 6 months earlier. "We need to operate within the next 2 weeks. The growth patterns suggest we're looking at a very aggressive timeline." My hands went numb. Surgery meant missing my final exams. Surgery meant delaying graduation. Surgery meant dipping into the medical fund my parents had been building since I was diagnosed with a thyroid condition at 15. But that fund was supposed to cover exactly this kind of emergency. Dad always said, "Health first, everything else second, Madison. That's what this money is for." I called Mom first, my voice shaking, as I explained Dr. Reynolds' urgency. "Mom, I need to schedule the surgery for next Friday. The doctor says we can't wait any longer." There was this long pause. Too long. Then Mom's voice came back, strained and weird. "Honey, we need to talk about the medical fund." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean, talk about it?" "Well, Emily's wedding is in 2 weeks, and with all the last-minute expenses..." I actually laughed. I couldn't help it. "Mom, are you seriously telling me that Emily's wedding is more important than cancer surgery?" "It's not cancer, Madison. Don't be so dramatic. And Emily only gets married once. This is her special day." That's when I knew something was very, very wrong. Have you ever had that moment where your entire reality shifts and suddenly you're seeing your family through completely different eyes? Because that's exactly what happened to me in that phone call. I drove home that evening, my mind racing through 15 years of memories I'd apparently been viewing through rose-colored glasses. Walking through the front door felt different somehow, like I was seeing the family photos on the walls for the first time. There was Emily at her high school graduation, beaming in her cap and gown with both parents flanking her. There was Emily's college acceptance letter, framed on the mantle. Emily's sorority formal photos. Emily's study abroad pictures from Paris. And then I found one picture of me. One. It was my high school graduation photo, stuck behind a larger frame of Emily's engagement pictures. Mom was in the kitchen, aggressively chopping vegetables for dinner. She didn't look up when I walked in. "Your father will be home in an hour. We'll discuss this then." Discuss what exactly? Whether my surgery is worth more than Emily's flower arrangements? "Madison Rose Campbell, don't you dare take that tone with me. Emily has been planning this wedding for 2 years. The vendors are already paid, the venue is booked. Do you have any idea what it would cost us to cancel now?" I stared at her. "Do you have any idea what it could cost me to wait on this surgery?" Dad walked in right then, still in his work clothes, and immediately the energy in the room shifted. He looked between Mom and me, and I could see he already knew exactly what this conversation was about. "Daddy," I said, using the name I hadn't called him since middle school, "please tell me you didn't spend my medical fund on Emily's wedding." He loosened his tie and sat down heavily at the kitchen table. "Madison, sweetheart, it's not that simple." "Actually, it is that simple. You either did or you didn't." Mom jumped in before he could answer. "We borrowed from it, temporarily. Emily's new in-laws are very important people, Madison. This wedding is about more than just one day. It's about Emily's future, her husband's career, the connections she'll make. We'll pay it back after the wedding when some of Dad's investments mature." "How much?" My voice came out barely above a whisper. Dad wouldn't meet my eyes. "The surgery estimate is $42,000. The wedding ended up costing $45,000. The room started spinning. $45,000. They'd spent every penny of my medical fund, plus $3,000 more on one day. One single day for Emily. "So what exactly are you suggesting I do? Just wait to see if this tumor decides to be benign?" "The doctor said it might not be malignant," Mom said quickly. "You always assume the worst, Madison. Maybe you should get a second opinion. Maybe wait a few months until we can rebuild the fund. That's when Emily walked in. Perfect Emily with her perfect engagement ring and her perfect wedding dress hanging in the closet upstairs. She took one look at our faces and immediately knew what was happening. "Oh," she said softly. "You told her." "You knew?" I turned to stare at my sister. "You knew they were using my medical money for your wedding?" Emily's cheeks turned pink, but she lifted her chin defiantly. "Madison, you don't understand the pressure I'm under. James's family expects a certain level of presentation. His mother specifically said that their family values are reflected in how we handle important celebrations." "Your family values," I repeated slowly, "are reflected in spending your sister's cancer surgery money on centerpieces." "It's not cancer," Emily snapped. "You don't even know that yet, and you're being incredibly selfish about this whole thing." "I'm being selfish?" I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. "I'm being selfish for wanting surgery to remove a potentially malignant tumor?" "You're being selfish for trying to ruin my wedding with your drama," Emily shot back. "This is supposed to be the happiest time of my life, and you're making it all about you, like always." That phrase hit me like a physical blow. Like always. As if wanting medical care was just another example of me being self-centered. As if the 15 years I'd spent being the easy daughter, never asking for anything, never causing trouble, never demanding attention, had all been leading up to this moment where I was finally being too much. Mom nodded along with Emily's words. "Emily's right, Madison. You've always had a flair for the dramatic. Remember when you broke your arm in 7th grade and insisted on going to the emergency room instead of waiting for urgent care? It turned out to be just a hairline fracture." "It was still broken," I said, but my voice sounded weak even to myself. "And this might not even be anything serious," Dad added. "Dr. Reynolds is probably just being overly cautious. You know how these doctors are, always wanting to do expensive procedures." I looked around the kitchen at my family, my parents, who had just told me that my sister's wedding flowers were more important than my potentially life-threatening surgery. My sister, who was calling me selfish for having a medical emergency 2 weeks before her big day. And suddenly, I felt like I was watching this scene from outside my body, like I was witnessing someone else's family implode. "I need some air," I mumbled, and walked out the back door into our yard. I sat on the old swing set Dad had built when Emily and I were kids, the same swing set where I'd spent countless hours reading medical textbooks while Emily practiced cheerleading routines. The same swing set where I'd told my parents I wanted to be a doctor, where they'd smiled and said, "That's nice, honey," before turning back to Emily's latest achievement. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around expecting to see Mom or Dad, but instead, it was Aunt Madison, my dad's younger sister, the one I was named after. She was 52, never married, and had built a successful accounting firm from nothing. She was also the only family member who had ever really seen me. "Rough night?" she asked, settling onto the swing next to mine. "They spent my medical fund on Emily's wedding," I said flatly. "All of it." Aunt Madison was quiet for a long moment, gently pushing herself back and forth on the swing. "I know," she finally said. "You know? Your father asked me to help him move some investments around to cover it. I told him it was a mistake." She looked at me sideways. "A big mistake. What am I supposed to do? I can't wait months for surgery. Dr. Reynolds was very clear about the timeline." Aunt Madison reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I've already talked to my financial advisor. I can cover the surgery." I stared at the paper in her hands. It was a cashier's check for $50,000 made out to me. "Aunt Madison, I can't take this. It's too much." "It's not too much for your health, Madison. And it's not a gift. It's an investment." "An investment in what?" She smiled, but there was something sad and knowing in her expression. "An investment in your future. And maybe in a little bit of justice." "What do you mean?" "Madison, honey, I've been watching this family dynamic for 28 years. Ever since Emily was born and suddenly you became invisible. I've seen how they treat you versus how they treat her. I've kept quiet because I hoped they'd eventually see what they were doing. But tonight proved they never will." She stood up and handed me the check. Take this money, get your surgery, graduate medical school, start your life, and don't look back. But what about Emily's wedding? What about Mom and Dad? Aunt Madison's smile turned a little sharper. Don't you worry about them, sweetheart. Time has a way of showing people exactly what their choices cost them. She paused at the back door. You just focus on getting healthy and building the life you deserve. The rest, well, the rest will work itself out. Trust me on that. As she disappeared into the house, I looked down at the check in my hands. $50,000. More than enough for the surgery. Enough for recovery time. Enough to graduate without financial stress. But somehow holding that check felt like holding much more than money. It felt like holding my entire future. I walked back into the house where my family was still sitting around the kitchen table, probably discussing how unreasonable I was being about the whole situation. They looked up when I entered, and I could see they expected me to apologize, to say I understood, to make this easy for them like I always did. Instead, I pulled out my phone and started typing a message in our family group chat. I found another way to cover my surgery. You don't need to worry about rebuilding the medical fund. Enjoy Emily's wedding. Then I did something I'd never done before in my entire life. I left the family group chat. I went upstairs to my room and started packing. Not everything, just enough for a few weeks. Because suddenly I realized I didn't want to be in this house anymore. I didn't want to wake up every morning in a place where my sister's wedding centerpieces were worth more than my life. As I folded clothes into my overnight bag, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. I was wearing the medical alert bracelet I'd had since my thyroid condition was first diagnosed, the little silver chain with the red medical symbol that my parents had bought me when I was 15, promising that they would always make sure I got the care I needed. I unclasped the bracelet and set it on my dresser, right next to a photo of Emily and me from last Christmas, both of us smiling at the camera like we were the perfect sisters in the perfect family. I guess some promises are easier to break than others. That night, I stayed at Aunt Madison's house. As I lay in her guest room, staring at the ceiling, I thought about what she'd said about justice and time showing people what their choices cost them. I didn't understand what she meant then, but something in her voice told me that this story was just beginning. And 10 years later, when I opened my front door to find 2 police officers standing on my porch, I finally understood exactly what she'd been talking about. But that's getting ahead of myself. First came the surgery, then medical school graduation, then residency, then fellowship, then building my practice. First came the years of holidays I didn't attend, family dinners I skipped, and phone calls I didn't return. First came the slow, steady process of building a life where my value wasn't determined by how little space I took up. Emily's wedding was beautiful from what I saw in the photos Mom posted on Facebook. $45,000 of beautiful. The flowers were perfect, the dress was stunning, and everyone looked so happy. What Mom didn't post were photos of the credit card bills that came after, or the argument she and Dad had about money for the next 6 months, or the way Emily's new in-laws actually ended up being rather unimpressed by the whole production, since it turned out they were more interested in character than centerpieces. But I didn't know any of that yet. All I knew was that I was lying in a hospital bed 3 days after my surgery, with Aunt Madison holding my hand, waiting for Dr. Reynolds to come back with the pathology results. The surgery had gone perfectly, but we wouldn't know if it had been necessary until the lab finished analyzing what they'd removed. When Dr. Reynolds finally walked in, his face was serious. Madison, I need you to know that if you had waited even another month, we would have been looking at a very different conversation. The tumor had been malignant. Stage 2, aggressive, and with clear signs that it was preparing to spread to my lymph nodes. Waiting for Emily's wedding to be over, waiting for my parents to rebuild the medical fund, waiting for a more convenient time would have literally cost me my life. That night, as I lay in my hospital bed with this knowledge, I thought about what would have happened if I had listened to my family. If I had been the good daughter one more time and put Emily's special day ahead of my own survival. I thought about Emily, probably on her honeymoon by now, posting pictures of herself on beaches and at fancy restaurants. I wondered if she'd even asked how my surgery went. And I thought about my parents who had raised me to believe that taking up space was selfish, that having needs was dramatic, that asking for anything was asking for too much. For the first time in my life, I felt something I'd never experienced before: anger. Not hurt, not disappointment, not confusion. Pure, clean, clarifying anger. Because as I lay there, recovering from surgery that had literally saved my life, I realized that my family's version of love had almost killed me, and that's when I made a decision that would change everything. I decided that I was done being the daughter who asked for nothing. I was done being the sister who took up no space. I was done being the family member whose needs came last. I was done being Madison the convenient, Madison the easy, Madison the forgettable. It was time to become Madison the unforgettable. The recovery from surgery took 6 weeks, and during that time, something fundamental shifted in how I saw my family. Maybe it was the clarity that comes from surviving something that could have killed you, or maybe it was finally having the space to think without constantly managing everyone else's emotions. But I started paying attention to things I'd somehow missed for 28 years. I started with the emails. My parents had put me on their family email chain when I was 16, back when email was still relatively new and exciting. For over a decade, I'd been copied on everything from vacation planning to financial discussions to family updates. I'd never really thought about what those emails revealed until I was stuck in bed with nothing to do but scroll through years of digital history. The pattern was impossible to miss once I started looking for it. Every family vacation was planned around Emily's schedule. Every holiday celebration was adjusted for Emily's preferences. Every major family financial decision was weighed against how it would impact Emily's life. And in email after email, I was either an afterthought or completely absent from the conversation. There was the thread about Christmas 2019, where Mom asked if everyone could make it to dinner at 3 p.m. instead of 5 p.m. because Emily's new boyfriend had to work that evening. 15 replies discussing the change, working around Emily's schedule, figuring out logistics. No one asked if the time change worked for me. No one even seemed to remember that I existed. There was the vacation planning thread from 2020, before COVID changed everything. Mom suggested a family trip to Napa Valley because Emily has always wanted to do wine tastings. Dad worried about the cost, but ultimately agreed because Emily worked so hard she deserves a special trip. The entire conversation was about making Emily happy. I wasn't even copied on half of those emails. But the email that really broke something open in my chest was from 3 years earlier. Mom writing to Dad about my college graduation. Madison's ceremony is the same weekend as Emily's sorority formal. Emily really wants us to be there for her formal since she's being honored as Sister of the Year. Madison will understand. She always does. They had missed my college graduation for Emily's sorority dance, and I had understood. I'd smiled and told them it was fine, that I knew how important it was for Emily to have them there. I'd even sent them pictures from my graduation so they wouldn't feel bad about missing it. Reading that email 3 years later, recovering from surgery they had almost prevented me from getting, I finally saw the truth that had been hiding in plain sight. They hadn't missed my graduation because Emily's formal was more important. They had missed it because Emily's feelings were more important than mine. Emily's disappointment mattered more than my pride. Emily's happiness was worth more than my accomplishment. I had been invisible in my own family for so long that I had become invisible to myself. That's when I started documenting everything. Not out of some grand plan for revenge, but because I needed to understand the scope of what I was dealing with. I opened a new folder on my laptop and started saving emails, text messages, photos, any evidence of how the family dynamic actually worked versus how I had been telling myself it worked. The text messages were particularly revealing. I scrolled back through 3 years of family group chats and individual conversations. Emily texting that she needed help moving apartments, and both parents immediately offering to rent a U-Haul and take the day off work. Me texting that I was sick with the flu and couldn't make it to Sunday dinner, and getting back a single K from Mom. Emily asking for a loan to cover her security deposit, and Dad transferring money the same day. Me asking if I could borrow Dad's car for a weekend medical conference, and getting a lecture about responsibility and the importance of planning ahead. Emily posting photos of her engagement ring in the family chat, and receiving 17 messages of congratulations and excitement. Me posting a photo when I got accepted to Johns Hopkins and receiving 4 responses, 3 of which were about how proud they were that their daughter was going to such a prestigious school. Not proud of me, proud of their daughter. Like I was a trophy that reflected well on them rather than a person with my own accomplishments. The more I documented, the angrier I became. Not just at my parents, but at myself. How had I participated in my own erasure for so long? How had I convinced myself that their love was real when the evidence of their neglect was right there in black and white? I called Aunt Madison during my 3rd week of recovery. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" she asked. "Angry," I said honestly. "I'm really, really angry." "Good. It's about time. I've been going through old emails and texts. Aunt Madison, they've been treating me like this my whole life. How did I not see it?" There was a long pause. "Madison, can I tell you something I probably should have told you years ago?" "Please." "I tried to intervene when you were younger, multiple times. I talked to your parents about how differently they treated you and Emily. I pointed out that they were showing favoritism that was damaging to both of you, but especially to you." I gripped the phone tighter. "What did they say?" "They said I was imagining things. They said they loved you both equally, just differently. They said Emily needed more attention because she was more social, more outgoing, more sensitive to family dynamics. They made it sound like ignoring you was actually good parenting because you were so independent and capable. So they knew what they were doing." Oh, honey, they absolutely knew. And when I kept pushing, when I suggested family therapy, or at least some honest conversations about the dynamic, they started limiting my contact with you. Remember how I used to babysit you all the time when you were little, and then suddenly I never seemed to be available? I did remember. Aunt Madison had been my favorite person when I was small. And then, somewhere around middle school, she just seemed to fade out of my life. I had assumed she was busy with work. They told me I was interfering with their parenting, and that if I couldn't respect their choices, I wouldn't be welcome around their children. So I backed off, and I've regretted it every day since. Tears were streaming down my face now. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because you're an adult now, and because nearly losing you was the last straw for me. I'm done protecting them from the consequences of their choices." "And Madison?" "I've been preparing for this day for a long time." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've been documenting their behavior too. Financial records, family event photos where you're consistently excluded or marginalized, emails they've sent me over the years complaining about your attitude whenever you did try to advocate for yourself. I've got 15 years of evidence that shows exactly who this family really is." The idea that Aunt Madison had been quietly building a case file about my own family's treatment of me was both validating and deeply unsettling. But it also made me feel less crazy, less alone in what I was seeing. "What are you planning to do with all that evidence?" "Nothing, unless they force my hand. Madison, I love my brother, but I love you more. And I love justice most of all. If they ever try to gaslight you about what your childhood was really like, if they ever try to rewrite history to make themselves look better, I want you to know that someone was paying attention. Someone saw what they did to you." After that conversation, I felt something I had never experienced before. The feeling of being truly seen and truly protected by a family member. Not protected from external threats, but protected from my own family's version of reality. That's when I started thinking seriously about what I wanted my life to look like going forward. I was about to graduate medical school and start my residency at Seattle Children's Hospital, 3,000 miles away from my family. I had the perfect opportunity to build a new life, surrounded by people who valued me for who I was, rather than how little space I took up. So I made a plan. I would graduate, move to Seattle, and start creating boundaries that actually protected my emotional well-being. No more family group chats where I was ignored or marginalized. No more holidays where I pretended everything was normal. No more phone calls where I listened to my parents rave about Emily's latest achievement while barely acknowledging my own existence. I wasn't planning to cut them off completely. I wasn't planning revenge or dramatic confrontations. I was just planning to stop participating in my own diminishment. But apparently, even that was too much for them to handle. The pushback started as soon as I began setting boundaries. When I told Mom I wouldn't be coming home for Emily's birthday party because I had an important exam the next day, she accused me of being jealous and petty. When I didn't respond to the family group chat's discussion about Thanksgiving plans for 3 days, Dad called to lecture me about family commitment and respect. "Madison, your mother is worried about you," he said. "You've been distant since your surgery. We understand you went through a scary time, but you can't punish the family because you were upset about the wedding fund situation." "I'm not punishing anyone, Dad. I'm just focusing on my own life for once." "See, that's what I'm talking about. This new attitude of yours, it's not like you to be so selfish." That word again, selfish. The same word they'd used when I had wanted surgery for a potentially cancerous tumor. The same word they used any time I expressed a need or want that didn't align with what was convenient for them. "Dad, can I ask you something? When was the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? Not because you needed something, not because Mom was worried about my attitude, just because you wanted to talk to your daughter?" There was a long silence. "Madison, that's not fair. You know we love you." "When, Dad? When was the last time?" More silence. Then, "Madison, you're being ridiculous. We talk all the time. We talk when you need something from me. We talk when you're upset about something I've done or haven't done. We talk when Emily needs something and you want me to help. But when do we talk about my life? My dreams? My fears? When do we talk about who I am as a person rather than who I am in relation to what the family needs?" "Madison, I got into Johns Hopkins, Dad. Do you know what my GPA is? Do you know what specialty I'm going into for residency? Do you know who my friends are? Do you know what I do for fun? Do you know anything about my life that isn't directly related to how it impacts Emily or the family?" The silence stretched so long I thought he might have hung up. "You're going into pediatric oncology," he finally said, and I could hear him struggling to remember. "And you got into Johns Hopkins, which is very prestigious." "Seattle Children's Hospital, Dad. I'm doing my residency at Seattle Children's Hospital. I matched there 8 months ago. I told you and Mom when I found out. Emily was getting her nails done for some event, and you both spent the entire phone call talking about what color looked best with her dress. That's not? I'm sure we celebrated your match. You said, 'That's nice, honey,' and then asked if I thought Emily should go with the coral or the rose gold." I heard him take a shaky breath. "Madison, if we haven't been as attentive as we should have been, we're sorry. But this attitude you've developed isn't helping anything. Family means supporting each other, not keeping score." "You're right, Dad. Family should mean supporting each other. So where was my support when I needed surgery? Where was my support when I was applying for residency programs? Where was my support during the hardest year of my life?" "We gave you support. We've always supported you. You gave Emily $45,000 for 1 day. You gave me criticism for being dramatic about cancer. It wasn't cancer. It could have been. It would have been if I had waited like you wanted me to." Another long silence. Then Dad's voice, smaller now. "Madison, what do you want from us?" It was the first time in my adult life that either of my parents had asked me what I wanted, and the answer surprised even me. "I want you to see me," I said quietly. "I want you to know who I am. I want you to care about my life even when it doesn't serve Emily's interests or the family's image. I want to matter to you as much as she does. You do matter to us. Dad, you spent my medical fund on Emily's wedding flowers. That wasn't about who mattered more. That was about timing, and it was about priorities. And your priorities have been clear for 28 years. Emily's happiness comes first. Emily's dreams come first. Emily's needs come first. I get whatever is left over, and lately there isn't much left over." I hung up before he could respond. And for the first time in my life, I didn't immediately call back to apologize for being difficult. That night, Emily called me. "Madison, what is your problem?" she said without even saying hello. "Mom is crying because of whatever you said to Dad, and honestly, I'm sick of you making everything about yourself lately." Emily, do you remember my college graduation? What? What does that have to do with anything? Do you remember it? Were you there? Of course I was there. I'm your sister. No, you weren't. None of you were. You had your sorority formal that weekend, and mom and dad chose to go to that instead of watching their other daughter graduate from college. That's not. I mean, sorority formal was really important, Madison. I was being honored. And I was graduating from college with honors after 4 years of work. Well, yeah, but you graduate from stuff all the time. You've always been good at school. The formal was special for me because I'm not naturally academic like you are. I sat in my apartment, holding the phone, trying to process what she had just said. You graduate from stuff all the time. As if my accomplishments were so routine, so expected, that they didn't deserve celebration. As if being naturally academic meant I didn't work hard, didn't struggle, didn't deserve recognition for my achievements. Emily, do you love me? What kind of question is that? Of course I love you. You're my sister. Do you like me? Do you know anything about who I am as a person? Do you ever think about my feelings or my life when you're making decisions? Madison, you're being really weird right now. Did something happen with your surgery? Are you on medication that's making you emotional? Even Emily was gaslighting me now, suggesting that my entirely reasonable questions about our relationship were symptoms of medical or psychological problems rather than legitimate concerns. Never mind, Emily, just forget I asked. Look, I don't know what kind of midlife crisis you're having, but you need to figure it out and stop taking it out on the family. We love you, but we're not going to walk on eggshells because you're going through some kind of phase. After she hung up, I sat in the silence of my apartment and realized that I had just gotten my answer. Emily didn't see me as a person. I was a role in her story. The smart sister, the reliable one, the one who would always understand and accommodate and fade into the background when necessary. None of them saw me as a person. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to cut them off dramatically or seek revenge or try to make them understand what they had done. I was simply going to stop being available for a dynamic that was slowly killing my soul. I was going to move to Seattle and build a life where I mattered, where my accomplishments were celebrated, where my feelings were considered, where my presence was valued rather than merely tolerated. And if they wanted to be part of that life, they would have to learn to see me as something other than Emily's less important sister. But first, I had one more thing to do. I picked up my phone and called Aunt Madison. I'm ready, I told her. Ready for what, sweetheart? Ready to stop pretending this is a normal family. Ready to stop protecting them from the consequences of how they've treated me. Ready to let them experience what life feels like when I'm not available to be ignored and taken for granted. Are you sure? Because once you start setting real boundaries, once you start living like you matter, there's no going back. They're going to fight you. They're going to try to guilt you back into your old role. They're going to paint you as the problem. I know, but Aunt Madison, I'd rather be the problem in their story than invisible in my own life. Then let's get started, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Because, sweetheart, you have no idea how long I've been waiting for this conversation.